The ground shakes beneath your feet. You grip your rifle so tightly your hands hurt. The officer blows his whistle. In 5 seconds, you'll climb out of this trench, and many of the men beside you won't make it through the day. But how did you end up here? 3 weeks earlier. You check your mailbox, an envelope. It's short. Official. There are only a few lines, but they change everything. You have been called to military service. Just days ago, life was simple. Mornings began with familiar routines, family meals, work, familiar streets, familiar faces. The future seemed predictable. Now every conversation is different. Friends try to sound brave and parents hide their worry. You don't know when or if you'll see them again. Within days, you're on a crowded train with hundreds of other recruits, all heading toward training camps filled with strangers who share the same uncertainty. As the train pulls away from the station, you watch your hometown disappear into the distance. You don't know it yet, but it'll be years before you see it again. Before the sun rises the next morning, a whistle tears through the camp. On your feet. Within seconds you're outside, still half asleep. Military life has begun. You receive a uniform that doesn't fit perfectly, heavy leather boots, basic equipment, and a rifle that quickly becomes part of your daily life. The instructors waste no time. March, stop, turn, repeat, hour after hour. You learn how to clean your rifle until every piece shines, how to dig trenches, how to react to artillery, how to survive a gas attack by putting on a mask in seconds. Every mistake you make is corrected immediately, because on the battlefield, mistakes can cost lives. 3 weeks pass, and one morning your name is called. 4 words change everything. You're leaving for France. France, the Western Front. The train is loud. Men joke. Someone sings. But as you cross the English Channel, the closer you get, the realization hits, and the more the signs of war become impossible to ignore. Columns of wounded men head in the opposite direction. Villages show shattered walls and broken windows. Fields once used for farming are scarred by shell craters. Trees stand stripped of their branches like dark skeletons against the horizon. Even before seeing the trenches, the war has already transformed the land. The first thing you notice is the smell, wet earth, smoke, rotting timber. You instinctively cover your nose, but it doesn't help. The trenches stretch for miles, twisting across the countryside in long, narrow lines protected by sandbags and wooden supports. This is where soldiers eat, sleep, wait, sometimes for weeks. The mud is everywhere. Boots sink with every step. Keeping feet dry becomes nearly impossible, and prolonged exposure can lead to painful infections that military doctors constantly warn about. Rats thrive in the trenches and aren't scared of people anymore, feeding on discarded food and anything else they can find. At night, they scurry through the darkness, startling you while you're trying to sleep. Leeds becomes another one of your constant companions. Clean uniforms are almost impossible for you to maintain. Comfort quickly becomes a distant memory. Most days are not spent charging across open fields. They're spent waiting, listening, watching, repairing damaged trenches after shell fire, carrying supplies through deep mud, writing letters home whenever there's time. You don't want your family to worry, so you describe life as easier than it truly is. You don't mention every explosion, or every sleepless night, or the fear that never completely disappears, because fear becomes part of your daily life. Not loud, not dramatic, just constant. One morning before sunrise, the atmosphere changes. Orders begin moving quietly down the trench. You quietly check your equipment again and again. Others sit in silence, staring at the muddy floor of the trench. You pull the folded photograph from your pocket, taking one last look at your family, waiting hundreds of miles away. No speeches, just instructions. The objective lies somewhere beyond the trench line. You know exactly what is coming next, and it's what you've been dreading. Your mouth feels dry. Your hands won't stop shaking. The artillery begins. Hundreds of guns fire together, shaking the earth beneath your feet. The ground doesn't just shake. It feels alive. Every explosion sends dirt raining down into the trench. Your ears begin ringing until it's almost impossible to hear the man standing beside you. Every blast vibrates through your chest, and after a while, you lose track of where one explosion ends and the next begins. For hours, shells crash into enemy positions in an attempt to destroy defenses before the advance begins. An officer walks down the trench, giving final instructions. Faces are tense. You don't know what waits beyond the top of the trench. Then you hear the whistle. Nobody moves. For half a second, everyone freezes. Then the first soldier climbs the ladder. Another follows, then another. And then you realize it's your turn. You start climbing the wooden ladder and move forward into a landscape transformed by years of fighting. Fields that were once farmland have become endless craters filled with muddy water. Trees stand broken and splintered. Tangled barbed wire stretches across the scarred earth, and thick smoke hangs low over the battlefield. Keeping together is nearly impossible. The smoke limits your visibility, the uneven ground slows every step, and the constant noise makes shouted orders difficult to hear. Now all that training that has consumed your life takes over. Stay with your unit. Keep moving. Watch for cover. Nothing feels orderly. The battlefield is confusion, noise, and uncertainty. Every step you take requires courage. By evening, you return changed. You are exhausted beyond words. As the fighting dies down, no one celebrates. The first thing you do is look for the men you arrived with. One by one, familiar faces begin appearing through the smoke. You start helping exhausted friends back toward the trench and assist the medics as they move among the wounded. Everyone searches for someone, and not everyone is found. More than a year later, in November 1918, the guns finally fall silent. The armistice marks the end of fighting on the Western Front. When you finally return home, everything looks familiar. But something feels different. People celebrate the end of the war, yet you see so many families stand beside empty chairs at dinner tables. Nearly every town has names that will never return. You try to settle back into ordinary life. You find work again. You reconnect with old friends. Some conversations come easily. Others never happen. There are memories that are difficult to explain to anyone who wasn't there. Years later, your grandchildren ask what the war was like. You pause. You think about the trenches, the mud, the explosions, the fear. But instead, you smile and simply tell them, "I'm just grateful you never had to see it." Because after everything you've lived through, peace is something you'll never take for granted again. History isn't made by kings alone. It's lived by ordinary people.